I was 50 when I started feeling the silence grow louder. Not the kind of silence you get when you're alone in a room, but the kind that shows up even when you're with people. A silence that lives between conversations, behind smiles, under the surface of busy days. I didn't notice it at first. I had work. I had responsibilities, bills to pay, places to be, people who needed things from me, and I was good at being needed. It made me feel important, like I still mattered, like I was still young. But 50 has a strange way of sneaking up on you, not with thunder but with whispers. A little more stiffness in your back, a little more noise in your mind at night, a little more longing when you watch the sun go down, and you realize there's less ahead than there is behind. But I brushed it off. I had told myself a lie, and believed it for far too long, that life would keep going just as it had always gone, that I could outrun the wear and tear, that the things I kept putting off could wait forever. If I could go back now and sit across from myself at 50, I wouldn't lecture him, I wouldn't yell, but I'd reach across the table, place a hand on his, and just say quietly, "Don't wait to feel the cost." You see, I was so focused on being strong that I ignored how tired I was. Not just my body, though, yes, that too. It was my soul that felt worn thin. I kept pushing through the days like I had something to prove. I said yes to every request, showed up for everyone but myself. I called it responsibility. I called it commitment. But really, I was afraid. Afraid that if I stopped, everything would fall apart. Maybe even me. What I didn't understand then was that slowing down isn't the same as giving up. Taking a breath doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise enough to know you're not made of steel. I wish I had let myself rest. I mean truly rest. The kind of rest where you put down not just the tools in your hand, but the weight on your shoulders. I can't tell you how many mornings I woke up back then with my jaw clenched and my chest tight, and still pushed through because that's just life. But life wasn't meant to be endured. It was meant to be lived. And part of living is learning when to pause. That's something I only learned after I had missed too many moments. The quiet cup of tea my wife made for me on Sunday mornings. The sound of birds outside the kitchen window. The way my son used to wait for me to look up from my papers just to tell me about his day. I missed those. And no, they don't come back. Time is funny like that. It gives and it gives and it gives until one day it doesn't. And when it stops giving, it doesn't leave a note. Just an empty space where something used to be. At 50, I also thought my relationships would hold on their own. That they didn't need tending. That the people I loved knew I loved them and that was enough. It wasn't. It's not enough to love people in your heart. You have to show them. You have to say it. Often. In the middle of the mess. In the middle of the tired days and the long nights. You have to make time even when you're busy. Especially when you're busy. Because love, it doesn't live in the grand gestures. It lives in the small ones. A hand held during a drive. A laugh shared at the dinner table. A note left on the counter that says, "I'm proud of you." I used to think I'd have more time for that. I thought I'd eventually retire and then pour my energy into my marriage, my kids, my friends. I was always planning to be more present later. But later doesn't always come the way you think it will. My wife, God bless her, she never complained. But I can still see the way her eyes used to search mine, hoping to find something deeper than distraction. And sometimes, they didn't. We had good years, don't get me wrong. Beautiful years. But I regret the evenings I came home and only offered her half my attention because my mind was still at the office. I regret the times I nodded but didn't truly listen. I regret choosing urgency over intimacy. And now, I sit here, 80 years old, and I would trade almost anything to go back and ask her how her day really was. To sit across from her with no agenda, no clock ticking. Just her and me and time that mattered. I know I can't, but maybe you can. If you're 50 now or somewhere close to it, I hope you'll look up from whatever screen you're staring at. I hope you'll turn to the person beside you and really see them. I hope you'll say the thing you've been meaning to say, even if your voice shakes. Because those small moments, they're the ones you'll carry with you when you're old like me. Not the deadlines, not the promotions, not the likes or the meetings, The eyes of your child when you finally put the phone down and really looked. The softness in your partner's voice when you remembered their favorite song. The feel of grass under your feet because you actually took the time to walk barefoot again. These are the moments that matter, and they're the easiest to miss when you think you have time. There's something I need to tell you about my body at 50. It whispered before it screamed. At first, it was little things. A stiffness in the knees when I climbed the stairs. A dull ache in my back after long car rides. I'd wave it off, laugh even. Just getting older. I'd joke with my coworkers, massaging my shoulder like it was nothing. But behind that laugh, I was scared. Not of pain, really. I could handle pain. I'd lived through enough of it. What frightened me was what the pain represented. That I wasn't invincible anymore. That my body, this body that had carried me, built homes, held children, worked long nights, was beginning to change in ways I didn't want to admit. So I ignored it. I pushed through like always. I skipped the doctor's appointments unless something was bleeding or broken. I ate whatever was fast and easy. I drank more coffee than water. I convinced myself that rest was a reward, not a right. And slowly, I wore myself down. I know now that ignoring the body is a kind of disrespect. Not just to the body itself, but to the life it makes possible. The walks in the woods, the dances in the kitchen, the ability to lift your grandchild without wincing. I don't have those moments anymore. Not the way I used to. My joints don't let me move like I want to. My balance isn't what it was. I sit more than I stand, and I nap more than I used to. Not out of leisure, but necessity. And you know what hurts most? Knowing some of it could have been different. If I had listened when my knees first started speaking, if I had stretched more, moved more, rested better, eaten real food, taken walks just because I could. It's not about vanity. I'm not talking about chasing youth. I'm talking about honoring the temple that carries you. Because when it starts to give out, and trust me, you'll understand how sacred even the smallest movement was. You don't think about your hips when they work right. You don't thank your hands when they open jars without effort. But when those abilities fade, they don't go quietly. They take with them parts of your independence. And independence at 80 is the most valuable currency there is. But health isn't only physical. No, not at all. At 50, I was tired emotionally too. But I told myself to man up, to get over it. That men don't dwell on feelings, they fix things. But what I didn't understand is that what you don't feel, you don't heal. There were nights I couldn't sleep. Not because of noise outside, but because of the noise inside. Regrets I buried. Conversations I avoided. Anger I never processed. Grief I never named. I thought bottling it up made me stronger. Didn't. It made me quieter, colder, a little more distant from the people I loved. You think you're protecting them by staying strong. But sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let them in. I remember my daughter once sat beside me after dinner. She must have been 22 at the time, and she said, "Dad, are you okay?" I smiled. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? She hesitated, looked at her plate and said, "Because sometimes it feels like you're here, but not really here." That stayed with me. She was right, of course. I was there in body, but not in soul. I had stopped showing up fully because I hadn't made space to care for myself emotionally. I thought self-care was selfish. I see now it was survival. It's not weak to sit with your sadness. It's not indulgent to go to therapy. It's not foolish to write in a journal or cry in the car or take a day off just because you need it. That's not weakness. That's wisdom, and I missed that chance. I waited too long to take my emotional health seriously. I waited until the weight of it became too heavy to hide. By then, it had already left its mark on my marriage, on my relationships, on the way I saw myself in the mirror. Now I sit here looking back, and I want to shake that version of me just gently and say, "You're not a machine. You're a man, and men feel things. It's okay to feel. You know, when you're 80, you stop worrying so much about looking tough. You just want to feel free. Like, you want to look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. Not someone pretending to be fine, but someone finally at peace. And peace? It's hard to find when you've spent decades denying what your body and heart have been begging you to hear. So if you're still here, if any of this feels familiar, leave me a comment. I'd love to know if you've felt this too. Or maybe you've learned to care for yourself better than I did. Either way, your story matters, and I'd be honored to hear it. I'm not telling you this because I want your pity. I don't need that. I'm telling you because it's too late for me, but not for you. Don't wait for the warning signs to become consequences. Don't let pride rob you of the chance to feel whole. You get one body, one heart, one lifetime to live inside them. Treat them gently. They're doing the best they can. I used to dream, not just the sleepy kind, but the kind you carry in your chest. The kind that keeps you awake at night in a good way. When I was younger, even into my 40s, I still had those dreams. Some were small. Taking a road trip out west, learning to play the piano, writing a book I'd been sketching in my mind for years. And some were bigger, like building something that mattered. Not just for money, not just for status, but something that made people feel something. But somewhere around 50, the dreaming stopped. I didn't notice at first. I told myself I was just being realistic, that I had mouths to feed, bills to pay, a job that demanded more and more of me every year. I told myself dreams were for the young, or the lucky, or the reckless, not for people like me who had responsibilities. I traded my somedays for schedules, my ideas for inboxes, my spark for survival. And I don't say that with bitterness. I provided for my family. I showed up. I did what I had to do. But in the process, I put pieces of myself into storage, and I never went back to get them. I had a dusty old guitar in the attic that I swore I'd tune one day. I had notebooks filled with story ideas, folded between tax documents and insurance files. I had this little dream, I don't think I ever even told anyone, of opening a tiny bookstore when I retired, maybe with a little coffee corner. Nothing grand, just a place with warm lights, soft chairs, and shelves full of forgotten stories. But I never got around to it. The years rolled on and I got promoted, then laid off, then rehired, then tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from living a life slightly off-center from who you really are. The truth is, I thought I had more time. I thought I'd circle back to those dreams once things settled down. But they never really did. There was always something urgent, something louder than that quiet voice inside me that used to say, "This matters to you." By the time I was 65, retirement didn't feel like a new beginning. Felt like an echo, like I'd forgotten how to be anything other than useful to other people. I had spent so long performing a role that I no longer knew the lines to the play I actually wanted to be in. And that's what I wish I could say to my 50-year-old self. Don't wait until the world gives you permission to dream again. It never will. Make time for it, even if it's 10 minutes before bed. Pick up the brush. Open the notebook. Sign up for the class. Walk into the room where the piano sits silent. You don't need to be great at it. You just need to show up. Because what I've learned too late is that unexpressed passion doesn't just disappear. It turns into resentment. It builds walls around your joy. It makes you feel smaller, even when your life on the outside looks full. And the cruelest part? Eventually, you forget what the dream even was. You remember the longing, but not what it longed for. Now, at 80, I walk slower, and my hands shake just enough that writing more than a few lines makes my fingers ache. I still have stories, but my body's not as willing as it once was. I can't open that little bookstore now, not because someone told me I can't, but because I no longer have the strength to build the shelves or the stamina to run it day after day. That window has closed. It hurts to say that out loud. And yet, there's a strange beauty in that honesty. A kind of clarity that only comes when you realize the time to act isn't someday. It's now. Even in the smallest way. Even in secret. Even if no one claps. Because your soul knows when it's being neglected. And it will remind you. Sometimes in sadness. Sometimes in bitterness. Sometimes in that gnawing feeling that you can't quite name. So if you're 50, or anywhere close to it, ask yourself quietly, when no one's around, what have I set aside that still matters to me? Don't answer right away. Let the question sit. Let it come to you when you're doing the dishes or driving alone or watching the sky turn orange in the evening. That's when truth speaks the loudest. And when it does, I hope you listen, because it's not too late for you. It's too late for me. But if I've learned anything in these 80 years, it's that regrets don't have to be inherited. We can hand down wisdom instead. And that might be the most valuable thing we have left to give. There's a silence that doesn't come from peace. I'm not talking about the quiet of early morning or the hush of snowfall on an empty street. I'm talking about the silence that happens inside you when you stop listening to yourself for too long. That's the kind of silence I lived with at 50. It didn't show up all at once. It crept in slowly, through every time I bit my tongue to keep the peace. Every time I said yes when I meant no. Every time I nodded in a meeting while a part of me screamed inside, "This isn't who I am." I had been raised to be agreeable, to do the right thing, to follow the rules. And for the most part, I did. I was a good man. I worked hard, paid my taxes, showed up to birthdays and funerals, and held doors open for strangers. But somewhere in the middle of being a good man, I forgot to be an honest one. Not dishonest in the way that steals or lies, but dishonest in the way that hides. I hid parts of myself, not because I was ashamed, but because I thought they didn't fit the life I'd built. I had opinions I never voiced, needs I never named, boundaries I never set. I told myself it was noble, that I was avoiding conflict, that I was protecting people from disappointment. But the person I was disappointing was me. You see, there's a price to pay when you ignore your own voice. First, it's small. A tension in your shoulders. A sigh you can't explain. But over time, it grows. You become a stranger to yourself. You walk through your days like a well-dressed ghost. And one day you look in the mirror and realize you've become someone you don't fully recognize. A version of you trimmed down to fit someone else's story. At 50, I still had time to reclaim that voice. But I didn't. I stayed in conversations I didn't believe in. I said it's fine when it wasn't. I avoided hard talks with the people I loved most because I was afraid. Afraid they wouldn't understand, or worse, that I'd lose them. But the truth is, I lost a piece of myself every time I stayed silent. There's this moment I'll never forget. My wife and I were sitting at the kitchen table. It was late. The house was quiet. She looked at me and said, softly, "Sometimes I feel like I don't really know you anymore." I laughed it off. Said something like, "Well, we've been married 25 years. What else is there to know?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. What I should have said, what I wanted to say, was, "I don't know myself right now either, but I want to. I really do." But I was tired, and scared, and conditioned to avoid vulnerability. So I swallowed the truth, like I'd done 1,000 times before. And the silence between us grew just a little bit more. Now, all these years later, I understand that honesty isn't a threat to love. It's what makes love real. Saying what you need, how you feel, what hurts, what matters. That's how intimacy is built. Not just with others, but with yourself. I spent too many years being agreeable, when what I needed was to be authentic. I thought it would cost me something to speak up. And it did. It cost me the illusion that everyone would always be happy with me. But what I gained when I finally did start speaking much later in life was something far more valuable. I gained myself. Don't wait as long as I did. You don't have to burn down your life to be true to yourself. You just have to stop pretending you're okay when you're not. You just have to trust that the people who love you, truly love you, will want to know the real you, not the version you've edited for their comfort. And if they don't, then it's better to find out now than to spend the next 30 years playing a role you were never meant to play. We weren't made to be palatable. We were made to be whole. That means having edges, questions, doubts, dreams that don't make sense on paper, feelings that don't fit into polite conversation. At 80, I finally learned to say, that doesn't sit right with me. To ask, why do I feel heavy around this person? To walk away when something drains me. To walk toward what makes me feel alive. But I wish I had done it sooner. I wish I had honored the small voice inside me that whispered, there's more to you than this. If you hear that voice now, even faintly, please don't dismiss it. Don't drown it in noise or bury it under obligations. Sit with it, ask it what it wants, and then, as best you can, follow it. Even a little, even imperfectly, that's the path back to yourself. There's one more thing I haven't spoken about yet. It's the one I avoided the longest. The one that still tightens my throat when I think about it. Letting go, not just of people, but of places, of seasons, of symbols, of things that once anchored me in the world. When I was 50, I thought letting go meant failure. That holding on, fighting to preserve every photo, every ritual, every piece of what was a sign of love. That the tighter I held, the more it proved something. But love doesn't need proof. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is gently loosen your grip. I had a study filled with my father's books. I never read most of them, but I couldn't bear to box them up. They smelled like him. They sat where he had placed them. For years, I let that room collect dust, telling myself I'd go through it when I was ready. But I was never ready. Then one day, my grandson wandered in there. He picked up a book, opened it, and smiled. "Grandpa," he said, "can I have this one?" I wanted to say no, to keep it there, untouched, as if by guarding it, I could guard the past. But I looked at him, his little hands, his bright eyes, and I realized something. The past doesn't live in objects. It lives in what they inspire. So I said yes. He took that book home, and I imagine it lives on a shelf now, maybe even forgotten. But in that moment, I passed down more than paper and ink. I passed down permission. Permission to remember, without needing to cling. I wish I had done that sooner. I held on to so many things that no longer served me. Old clothes that no longer fit. Friendships that quietly withered. Habits I outgrew but refused to release because they felt familiar. Even grief I held like a badge. Especially grief. When my mother passed, I thought I had to keep her world intact. Her recipes, her handwriting, even the scent of her scarf. I told myself that if I let those go, I'd be letting her go. But now I see you don't honor someone by freezing time. You honor them by living fully with what they left you. The laughter, the resilience, the wisdom that seeped so deep into you, you don't even notice it's there anymore. Letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing both your hands so you can hold something new. At 50, I had the chance to release what no longer fit, but I waited. I filled closets and calendars and conversations with things that no longer matched the man I was becoming. It made me heavy, and when you carry too much, you stop moving forward. Now, I live in a smaller space. Most of what I own fits in a single room, and I've never felt lighter, because finally, everything around me has meaning. Every item has a name. Every photograph has a story. Every chair, every sweater, every cup. I chose them or they chose me. There's no clutter anymore. Not in my house. Not in my heart. If you're holding on to something right now, an old guilt, a toxic friendship, a version of yourself that no longer serves you, I hope you'll consider this. The past doesn't need you to protect it. It needs you to transform it, to carry its lessons into something beautiful and brave and still unfolding. At 80, I've learned to sit with empty spaces. Not fear them, not fill them, just sit with them, because some spaces aren't meant to be filled. They're meant to be honored. That's where the people you've lost still speak, where the dreams you outgrew still echo, where your spirit stretches beyond what you thought you needed, and learns to rest in what you have. And you, wherever you are, however old you are, you still have time. Time to let go. Time to lighten your load. Time to finally feel free. If you'd like to return to this little corner again, you know where to find me. This space doesn't go anywhere, and neither do I.